From the moment the first boom of the kick drum pulsed in Megalobox, I knew that the music in this show was going to be something special. And I wasn't wrong. This is one of the best soundtracks of any anime, no, any television show or movie in general that I've ever seen. It's one of those OSTs that elevates the show beyond levels it could otherwise reach. Through its mixing, instrumentation, tone, style, and use of repeated musical themes, this soundtrack perfectly complements Megalobox's visuals, direction, and plot. Good job, Mabanua. You've done it. Your soundtrack is a real winner. So let's start with the mixing. Now, I've spent a lot of time fiddling around with Ableton Live in the hopes of making professional sounding music, and after over a year of trying to figure out what I'm doing, I think I'm finally starting to kind of understand how to make a full, complete mix. One important aspect of this is having a reference track or reference tracks to pull inspiration from and to model my own work's sound after. I can say with complete confidence that Megalobox's OST just became my go-to source for how I think a mix should sound. It's full without being overly abrasive, which is incredibly difficult to achieve. Whether I listen to this soundtrack with the volume cranked up or as some quiet background music, this bad boy punches like a kangaroo with a noose wrapped around its testicles. This is because each instrument in the mix occupies its own space, so there isn't an overabundance of high or low sounds, and in fact, each frequency range is perfectly utilized. There's just the right amount of buzzing, bassy synths and squealing, booming midis and brass to create a soundscape that is not only rich but also diverse. In no case is the expert mixing more obvious than with the drums, which sound purposefully messy with dirty cracks and bangs that cut through the mix. Just like the rest of the music, regardless of if we're talking about electronic drums or acoustic drums, the hi-hat, snare, kick drum, toms, ride cymbal, and crashes all have a perfect punchiness to them while still remaining open. This mix always has space to it, always has a certain emptiness that is reminiscent of older hip-hop albums and the best ones out there, and each instrument slices through that emptiness at just the right time and in just the right way. Which leads me to the instrumentation itself. This soundtrack is very electronic. By that I mean that it frequently uses synths, electronic drums, MIDI instruments, and methods of compression that enhance acoustic sounds but also give nearly the whole soundtrack that buzz that most of us associate with electronic music. Now, I'm not usually the biggest fan of electronic music. I find that it can very easily sound far too unnatural, that the human element of the music is so often completely removed from it. But Megalobox's OST manages to keep that human element intact. In part, it does this by having pieces where most of the elements involved are acoustic, or are at least mimicking acoustic sounds. But this is also achieved by simply not having everything be too clean. See, something that can be done with electronic music that is nearly impossible to do with acoustically recorded music is perfect synchronization. Throughout Megalobox's soundtrack, the instruments don't play right in time with each other. It's very subtle, but each instrument isn't always playing right on beat. There's some give and take, there's some movement. It makes it so that, although I'm sure much of the soundtrack was recorded by plopping down sounds into MIDI tracks and going ham, it feels like someone played this music. Or at the least, it doesn't sound like something has been composed or programmed. It feels like this soundtrack has exited its creator's brain and gone right into ours. In addition to this, the music doesn't feel heavy or bloated, not only because each instrument occupies its own space in the mix, but also because, as Mabanua said in an interview with Crunchyroll, when you pursue speed in sound, it should get lighter as it gets faster. However, when you want depth in sound, you lose the speed and it gets slower. And he's entirely correct. Overly heavy tones playing at a fast speed sound and feel unnatural. After all, one of the first things my drum teacher told me was, don't tense up when you're going faster. You're going to want to, but you have to loosen up and hit lighter. That's the only way you'll get as fast as you want to be. The same goes for composition, and for playing nearly any instrument. This mentality is most obvious when we consider the different versions of themes found in this soundtrack, and most of them are used multiple times in extremely varied ways. For example, the actual Megalobox theme is used in 4 different ways right off the bat in this soundtrack. In the main theme, aptly titled Megalobox and Megalobox Sorrow, which has an accompanying guitar that chugs along like a choo-choo train on steroids, Megalobox Acoustic, which is a surprisingly gentle piece that keeps in the natural squeaks and slides of the acoustic guitar, that adds a certain feeling of closeness, of personalness. And then Megalobox Emotional, a piece that swaps out the aggressive electronic guitar of Megalobox Sorrow for piano, and wherein the melody is played by a synth that sounds like a lonely whistle. Because of the simplicity and catchiness of this theme, It can be used across these different pieces and manipulated and altered in different ways to suit a variety of different tones. This is imperative in pretty much any soundtrack, as it gives each scene the theme is used in a sense of coherence with the rest of the work, while not being so much of the same that it's boring to listen to. But the soundtrack still maintains a consistent tone with its dark, dissonant harmonies and its victorious, intense melodies. It sounds rustic, it sounds gritty, it sounds like two dudes beating the shit out of each other in a boxing ring, and it sounds personal. This isn't some soaring orchestral soundtrack. This is hip-hop. This soundtrack roots itself in a genre that is full of songs about people going against the flow, fighting, and trying to make names for themselves. It's rooted in rap, which more so than any other genre of music I can think of, involves direct duels with others to see who can think on their toes faster and come up with better rhymes, with better plays on words, and with better flow and rhythm. But really, if there's one thing that's important about this soundtrack, it's that it's fun. I know that isn't a particularly analytical thing to say, and I know that you don't learn anything about the soundtrack by me saying that. But as I listened to the soundtrack at my soulless desk job and felt a goofy grin spreading across my face and my foot tapped to the beat, time moved a little bit faster, and life was just a little bit more interesting. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that if you enjoyed it, you'll subscribe to the channel. I have some other videos on here about soundtracks and that sort of thing and about anime, so I also want to take a moment to thank all of the wonderful people on Patreon for their wonderful donations. You guys are the best. You rock. I hope that you all have a good day, and that I'll hear from you down in the comments below. Bye-bye.